Professor Schulman said his of two plays based on these. And before that, there are a few more texts I want you to look at very briefly. And yesterday I made a brief mention of perhaps one of the greatest poets in pre-modern Kannada, Shishunal Sharif Saab. Though he was not directly connected with this Kodekal tradition, he was one of those hundreds of poets between 18th and 19th centuries in different parts of Karnataka and some border areas of Andhra and Maharashtra who composed a new genre of poems called Tattvapada. They were not monks, they were not sannyasis, they came from different walks of life. They represented the whole cross section of society and they did the spiritual practice in the midst of their everyday life. Some of them were, of course, monks and heads of monasteries, but most of them were not. And the greatest of these poets is Shishunal Sharif because it's the most popular. And his compositions have a remarkable range. And the way he handles the language is magical. Let me briefly introduce this genre called Tattvapada. Of course, there is a similar genre in Andhra. They call it Tattva Telugu. In Karnataka, it's called Tattvapada. If it's translated literally, it means philosophical songs. But that's not what it means. If you talk to in fact, our poets for an oral tradition, they have their own poetics, which is different from the poetics of the literate people. For instance, they make a distinction between Narakavita and Harakavita. He says the poems written by other kinds of poets, scholar, literate kind of poets, is Narakavita, mortal poetry. And they claim that what they write is Harakavita. It is a divine kind of poetry. But their poetry does not always deal with spiritual subjects. It could be about anything. It could be about a cockroach, a bedbug, an insect, a needle, a broomstick, just anything under the sun. All kinds of figures. A woman who sells betel leaves in a weekly market, a prostitute, thief, all kinds of subjects. But by writing on, by all these things into all these people, all these objects into the world, they invest it with a meaning which is not accessible to ordinary consciousness because they bring to bear on these people the deeper spiritual insights. So it's a kind of poetry of inclusiveness because it includes everything, it's omnivorous. And they bring remarkably fresh material, and the language they use is down to earth, and most of them were not scholars, but they were initiated to this Avaduta school of practice. yesterday I said that the Kodaikkal tradition created a spiritual culture which cannot be identified with any particular caste. For example, Vachana tradition has now become identified with the Lingayat community of Karnataka. This did not happen to Kodaikkal tradition because right from the start they were aware that they should be free from the shackles of caste identity. And the majority of the followers of Kodaikkal tradition are from art communities, weavers, goldsmiths, ironsmiths, shepherds, and also quite a few untouchables and some Muslims also, because Kodaikkal tradition borrowed quite a bit from contemporary Sufi culture. Now, if we look at the life of Shah Sharif himself, he was born a Muslim, but his guru was a Shakta Brahmin, Govinda Guru. And he, towards the end of his life, he converted himself to Virashaivism. But he did not belong to any particular caste. And he was a school teacher for some time, but he gave up because his wife died when he wrote a fantastic poem about his wife's death. He says, Mohada Hendati Nigida Barika, Mavada Maniya Hanginyako. When the beautiful wife is dead, what do I have to do with my father in law's house? That's how the poem goes. And uh, his poems are the people who inherit this tradition. I met his great grandson, Hazare Saab, some 20 years ago, who was singing this on a, I mean, these songs are sung in the context of satsangs, which are held on the new moon night, and people from different villages come and gather at a particular place, and all night, different bhajana mandalis come, all night they sing these songs. For example, and the last descendant was Hazare Saab, who passed away some 10 years ago. And he used to tell me, the number of poems that your grandpa wrote is as countless as the stars. But human beings have only written down a few. And the singing of these songs is, I wouldn't like to call it a performance, it's an event. For example, on that new moon day, when I was there, he started singing one of Sharif's songs, Sorutihudu Maneya Marige. The roof of the house is leaking. The roof of the house is leaking. Though he started singing this, there were heavy rains. He lived in a small hut. He was very poor. And all the followers of Kodaikkal tradition, they embrace voluntary poverty. There are 1,000 matas of this tradition, and none of them are rich. They depend on mostly artisan followers and some peasant following. And unlike other matas of strong, powerful communities, they have never bothered to amass wealth because they still believe in voluntary poverty. So he lived in a hut and he started. It was raining, it was thundering, and the roof started leaking. And when this happened, he sang this song with much greater ecstasy and involvement. Sharif lived for about 60 years, going from village to village, and he frequented the cities like the North Karnataka, like Dharwad and Hubli, and so on. And he also witnessed the setting of the first mill. He was the first poet to record in his poetry the advent of colonialism. There are two poems that I'm going to look at today. Look at the colossal mill, Giriniya Vistara Nodiramma, and another poem, The Needle. We just take a look at these two poems. You have the handouts with you, and I'd like you to take a look at this. Look at the colossal mill, and then the poem Needle. So So after we read these poems and a brief discussion, which can go on up to for another 40 minutes, then we are going to watch videos for about 20 minutes from these two plays, and then we will continue the discussion. And the second hour, we are going to have a joint, lecture. I mean, discussion with me and Professor Schulman. So take a look at these poems. Yesterday's. Also, take a look at this roof of the house is leaking. Three poems, short poems. आप YouTube में जा सकते हैं. We can listen to this song. The roof of the house is leaking. As you read, let it be in the background.
Play music.
On YouTube only we have slightly filmy versions of these songs. Okay. The other two we don't have in the audio form. Uh, 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 yeah, now we can read these two. We've listened to and probably have taken a look at. Look at the colossal mill and the needle, only these 2 points, and then we come back to it in 3 minutes. I'll read the original of this. Look at the colossal mill. ಗಿರಣಿ ವಿಸ್ತಾರ ನೋಡಮ್ಮ ಇದಕ್ಕ ಪರಾಕು ಮಾಡಮ್ಮ ಧರಣಿಪತಿ ಮಹಾರಾಣಿ ದೊರೆಗಳು ಕರುನಾಟ ದೇಶದೊಡೆ ಮೆರೆಸಿದ ಮಹಾಚೋದ್ಯ ವಿದ್ಯಾ ಅರಿಯದಾಯಿತು ನರರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಜಲಾಗ್ನಿವಾಯು ಒಂದಾಗಿ ಕಲೆತೋಳ್ಳೆ ಚೆಂದಾಗಿ ನರದಿಂದ ಗಗನಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಟ್ಟಿದಂತೆ ಕಾಂಬುದು ಚೆಲುವ ಮಧ್ಯದ ಕಂಬವೋ ಹೊಗೆಯ ಬಿಂಬವೋ ಒಳಗೊಂದು ಬ್ಯಾರೆ ಆಕಾರ ತಿಳಕೋ ಚಮತ್ಕಾರ ದರಗಳೊಂಬತ್ತು ಚಕ್ರ ಸುಳಿವ ಸೂತ್ರದ ದಾರ ನಳಿಮೂರು ಕೊಳವೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಎಳಿ ತುಂಬು ತದರೊಳಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒರೆದಿಟ್ಟಿರಲಿ ಹಿಂಜಿ ಅಲ್ಯಾದವೋ ಹಂಜಿ ಗಾಳಿ ಎರಡರ ಮೇಲೆ ಮೂಲ ಭ್ರಮನಾಕಿಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಶಬ್ದ ತಿಕ್ಕ್ಯಾಡಿ ಆದವೋ ಕುಕ್ಕಡಿ ಪರಮಾನಂದವೆಂಬುವ ಪಟ್ಟೆಯೋ ಮಾರ ಕಿಟ್ಟವೋ ದರೆಯಳು ಶಿಶುನಾಳ ದೇವಾಂಗ ಋಷಿಯಿಂದ ನೇಯಿಸಿ ಹಚ್ಚಳ ಹೊಚ್ಚಿತೋ ಲೋಕ ಮೆಚ್ಚಿತು. This is it. And the needle, I remember most of the text. ಸೂಜಿಯೇ ನೀನು ಮೋಜಿಯೇ ಈ ರಾಜ್ಯದೊಳಗೆಲ್ಲ ತೇಜ ಕಾಣಿಸುವಂತ ಸೂಜಿಯೇ ನೀನು ಮೋಜಿಯೇ ಹರಿಯ ಶಿರಾದೊಳಗಿದ್ದಂತ ಸೂಜಿ ಹರದ ಕಪಾಲಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊಕ್ಕಂತ ಸೂಜಿ ಮರೆವೆಯ ಅರಿವಿಯ ಹೊಲಿವಂತ ಸಮಯಾದಿ ಮರೆ ಮಾಯವಾದಂತ ಸೂಜಿಯೇ ಇಂಪಾದ ದಾರಾದಿ ಬಂದಂತ ಸೂಜಿ ಇಂಪಾದ ಉಕ್ಕಿದಿ ಬಂದಂತ ಸೂಜಿ ಸೊಂಪಾದ ದಾರವ ಸೇದುವ ಸೂಜಿ ಕಂಪನಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ವಶವಾದ ಸೂಜಿ. ಅಂದಾದ ಅಂಗಿಯ ಹೊಲಿವಂತ ಸೂಜಿ ಅಂಗಾಳದೊಳಗೆ ಮರೆಯಾದ ಸೂಜಿ ತುಂಗಾ ಶಿಶುನಾಳ ದೀಶಾನ ನೆನೆವಾಗ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಮಾಯವಾದಿ ನೀ ಹೇಳೋ ಸೂಜಿ. So this is the original of the needle poem. So does anybody want to say anything about these poems? Yes, I think Sheldon Pollock has this wonderful term, the end of Kannada Indian pre-modernism. I think Shishna Sharif represents, like Mante Swami and Male Madheshwara I talked about yesterday, the end of Kannada pre-modernism. On the one hand, his personal poems, like Roof of the House Leaking, they express deep anguish of a common man who lived in villages of North Karnataka today. Interestingly enough, all these Tattvapadas uh, flourished in those regions of Karnataka. There was intense poverty, who were not directly under the rule of a king. In Hyderabad, Karnataka, and Bombay, Karnataka, not in Karnataka under the Maharajas of Mysore, which was, by comparison, much more prosperous than the northern regions. There were intense poverty, there were many famines, and so this anguish of the common people of poverty, hunger, and so on, apart from individual anguish. And for these saints, spirituality became a means of transcending their sufferings. And because they belong to the Kalagnana tradition, it's explained to what they mean by Kalagnana. To be intensely aware of the moment. They were also intensely aware of the fact that things were changing completely. And these two poems by Shishna Sharif, there are several others, they portend the advent of a completely new order. Sometimes he looks at it with amazement, sometimes with trepidation. And some of them responded to it in see, these the saints of this tradition, they distinguish between ordinary experiences and the experiences they create. They call them karanika, something that happens because of a very profound spiritual reason, karanika. And Sufis of the same area have another word for it, karamat. Karamat means, in ordinary parlance, it means miracle. But they don't mean miracle. It means it is an event with a special underlying meaning, and you'll be able to see only if your inner eye is open. For example, in this poem, the roof of the house is leaking. It's a normal experience, but he sees something else in that. And similarly, each object takes on a symbolic meaning. So this is and Tattvapada, I said, it's many literary scholars, they describe this as spiritual songs. This is not what the representatives of the tradition mean by that term. They say that Tattvapada is something that shows that everything is Tattvamasi. Everything embodies the truth of everything being the expression of the ultimate. There's no distinction between the relative and the ultimate. It's a kind of folk Advaita which has nothing to do with any churches or any established schools or monasteries. So, yes, yes, please. So, you said something really interesting, which is a combination of many different streams that are sort of moving to the early part of the 19th century, yeah, of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. Um, so the poems that you've read in was show it, whether it's the needle poem or the Irani. Uh-huh. How do you think the way that these poems are written, composed, sung, reflect are part of that modernity stuff? So they're aspects of a certain kind of modernity, like the factory, the company, all that. They are responding to certain images of modernity, but they're steeped in the tradition of this kind of people spiritual poetry, which is prevalent in different parts of India around this time. if I look at it, the same time when there's a Kodaikkal tradition flourished in Karnataka, you have Siddhar Kavida in Tamil Nadu, and in the North India we have several Nirguna traditions, and we're not yet in a position to look at the exchanges between these different regional traditions. For example, there was a lot of exchange between Maharashtra, region and Karnataka region, Andhra and Karnataka in the border areas. So they're steeped in this tradition. They're looking at these things. For example, he was witness to the setting up of the first government school. See, this was never there in the experience. It was the first of its kind in their lives, and he looks at it as something mystical, and this becomes the symbol of the whole cosmos for him. And but he also recognizes, for example, in the poem on the needle has always been there. For the first time, we are getting imported needles. So you needle ಇಂಪಾದ ಉಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಾದಂಥ ಸೂಜಿ made from this beautiful steel, ಸೊಂಪಾಗಿ ದಾರದೊಳಗೆ ಹೋಗುವ ಸೂಜಿ. You so beautifully the thread goes into you. ಸಿಂಪಿಗರನ್ನಾಗೆ ಬಲವಾದ ಸೂಜಿ. Every village must have a tailor. He calls it my brother tailor. Yes, you are his, literally speaking, you are his right hand man, ಬಲವಾದ ಸೂಜಿ. Company Sarkarda Vashwada Suji. How did he become the slave of Company Sarkar? And sometimes their response was very strange. There was another contemporary of Srishnath Sharif called Nagalinga Yogi. A few weeks before Queen Victoria ascended the throne in England, he asked his disciple to take him on a procession on the streets of Gadag. He got himself dressed as a woman and he asked his disciple to take him in that procession. And sometimes they would act in very non-rational ways. And one day he went to a church in Hubli and he, put a nail into the copy of the Bible there. So all these kinds of, what can we call, the Avadutas always act in ways which are not always rational. And there is a connection between, Karanika refers not just to the deeds but also to the words. And to this day, in the folk memory of this region, Dharwar, villagers still believe, for them, Srishnath Sharif is a living presence. They say, look at this house, Sharif Saab had cursed this, so it has become a wasteland now, and nobody dares to build a house there. So they had that kind of impact, purely because of the involvement with common people, not because they had any kind of political power, whatever. And they were not associated, they kept away from all powerful centers of religious power. They were with the common people. And Srishnath Sharif, for example, was a great expert in the folk theatre of Bailata. He used to act in plays, used to play on percussion instruments when such plays were held. And he would go and participate in the village fairs, and anything important happened in the village, he would go and participate. I would write a song about it. Because he could see deeper meanings in everything. This reminds me, of course, Sharif was not officially connected with any Sufi school, but he was blessed by a Sufi saint called Khadar Linga, who belonged to Kodaikkal tradition. In Sufi aesthetics, they believe that every expression makes sense on 7 levels of consciousness, not just one level. And similarly, the poets of Tattvapadas, the audiences believe that poems should make meaning at different levels. And the most important context of the meaning is now, this moment. Like when it was about to rain, or maybe after. So this song, "The Roof of the House is Leaking," is not just poetry, it becomes a kind of communion with what's happening in nature. And this is how they relate it to the deepest, it becomes a kind of communion with one's own deepest self and with nature and with the rest of the society. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, See, the ballad is a different thing. We also have many of them. For example, in Tamil Nadu, there is a genre called Kolai Pattu. Every time a murder took place in the village, some bard from the village would write a poem about it. Anything that happened important. For similarly, there are many songs about the train and when the car first appeared and all these things. Ballad is a different thing. But I think Tattvapada is something else. It not only talks about the event, it also suggests several levels of meaning. Yeah, that's a very good question. The answer to that question is it's not a given way. Every moment, every moment tries to disturb you out of that communion with everything else. And through Karunika, the another word in this tradition for this Karunika is Aghatita Ghatade. And phrase occurs in the Vachinas also, and Ramanujan has a beautiful translation for it, the happening that never happened. But the happening that never happened happens. So, every moment through your existential whatever, effort, whatever, you connect and reconnect with everything else. It's not just the poem, everything you say and every breath you breathe is an exercise in that direction. To live what they consider one's authentic self, which is connected with everything else. So, any other comment? Huh? They prefer to live in poverty. For example, these in Kodaikanal tradition, many of these monasteries, for example, all these Virashaiva mathas, they started getting a lot of grants and donations from kings and feudatories and so on. But in Kodaikanal tradition, they never went anywhere near centers of uh, wealth and power. They stayed close to common people, receiving whatever they get from their followers, lay followers, who are all working people. So it's the model which is the reverse of the model of gurus these days. Yes, in Sufism also there were two traditions. For example, if you look at the Sufis of Bijapur, uh, the Qadriya order of Sufis were very much with the sultans, whereas Awliya people were against sultans, and there were lots of conflicts between them. Not all Sufis were independent of the state. Some of them were, and some of them also became stooges of the state. But to this day, Kodaikkal tradition has not had any kind of truck with centers of power. And even the saints have taken care of it. For example, Manteswami, it is said that he told his disciples, and this is still practiced in his mata in Rajapapanapura. After my death, every year when you celebrate my annual mela, you have to serve to people only puffed rice and jaggery, nothing else. No big banquet. So even this matha is very simple. With other mathas in Karnataka, they have medical colleges, engineering colleges, and each one of them have a certain number of MLAs in the assembly. But these people have no, because they represent dominant castes of Karnataka, whereas these people are not associated with any caste group. It's a sect, but not a caste. And people from any sect can come into this. This is a very important distinction between pantha and jati in our sociology. It's true that sometimes panthas have become jatis, they've frozen into caste, but there are many sects which are still open. For example, Siddhas. Siddhas was a sect, but that has become a caste. For example, in coastal Karnataka, many of these Siddhas have become a caste now. They're considered as belonging to one of the untouchable castes, scheduled castes these days. For example, most of these jogis in this area, uh, 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 in the Madhya Pradesh, Bundelkhand, etc., they are now become a caste. Most of them have converted into Christianity in those regions. So there's an interesting, relationship between sect and caste, but Kodaikkal tradition still remains a sect. For example, Bhante Swami tradition is a sect, not a caste. Though majority of the followers are from artisan caste and untouchable communities, sometimes we also find upper caste followers. And when somebody who has to narrate Bhante Swami's song has to be initiated by a Nilagara, an elderly Nilagara into this cult. And one of the oaths they have to take is, I am going to sacrifice all my caste affiliations. Now, Guru is my father, Guru is my mother. Bhante Swami is my father, Bhante Swami is my mother. So they have to rid themselves. One of the conditions of being initiated into the cult is that they give up their caste.
There can be some kind of relation between this material, between Shakti and this exact contemporary in the Tamil country that's dominating us. But there's also a distinction between, actually, the closer parallel is to this earlier figure of Ayumanava Swami, 100 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Ayumanava is the one who has the kinds of features that we're talking about. And you can also see, I mean, I don't know any of the kind of dimensions, but it seems that this is drawing from that kind of tremendous strand in Canada of this kind of iconoclastic egalitarianism. Some kind of astonishing,
Yeah.
call it a Foucault Vita moment.
Yes, yes.
I think right. That
Yeah.
must be right.
Yeah.
That's the difference because the Tamil cases don't go all the way. They're not as extreme.
Yeah, in Karnataka, the most interesting thing is after 12th century, the court and the temple have nothing to do with the creation of new poetry.
The creation of what?
New poetry, or new cultures, literary cultures. They all happen outside the court and the temple. Uh, of course, there were courts, small courts like in Kerala and then in the Mysore. and the poets there were, these bootlicker poets were praising the kings and so on, writing unreadable, bombastic poetry. Uh, but the creative tradition of Karnataka of the 12th century completely cut itself off from the court and the temple. Uh, this, I don't know how it works out in other traditions. Maybe in Telugu there was a, for example, the temple of Tirupati had an enormous influence on the poets of the period. Uh, Even a woman poet like Venkamama, there's a woman poet called Venkamama in
The
Andhra.
most interesting poet in Nate Video in Telugu, actually.
Uh,
Nobody knows anything about it.
yes, I recently got to know about Venkamama. So, I mean, but in Telugu, there's the other tradition of Kaiva Narayan Tata, who lived on the border of Karnataka. He had nothing to do with, these Tirupati and other places.
But one thing we can say, you said that these are the true voices of the kind of modernity. So
Yes,
this is a free,
the true precursors of modernity, you could say.
it's a stronger form of modernity than the colonial modernity that everybody is always talking about. It's on the whole a very superficial phenomenon. This is not.
Yes, precisely. And when our literatures developed, when people started writing our histories, uh, it is these traditions that completely erased from their annals. And now, in the last 30, 40 years, we're trying to recover this tradition. And this is the amnesia that happened when modernity was born in our languages. Anything else? Shall we go back to the the videos of Malay Madheshwara and Monteswami, please? Okay. Now I'm going to show you one clipping from the play on Malay Madheshwara. And I don't have the video of the camera production of this play because it was done long ago and it's not documented. This is the production of the play that was done in a tribal language called Rabha in Assam. So this play is enacted by Rabha tribals by a young Rabha director who's a disciple of Kanai Krishna Shukracharya Rabha. And it has a very interesting way how the production took shape. When Kanai shared the English translation of this play, Madari Madaya and Malay Madheshwara, and these people felt this play is telling our story, so we want to do it. So the first they did it in Assamese, and then they founded their own theater in this remote village in Assam called Rampara in Gopalpara district, and it's a very it's situated in dense forest. Even this to this day, elephants attack those villages at night, and you have to cycle some 20 miles to the nearest school in this village. But a new theatre movement has come up in this place, and this was the first production of this group. So it was called Muchi Madaya uh, in Rabha. So the Rabha is a different language, like Bodo, another different from Ahobi's language. These tribal communities are always in a state of conflict with the mainstream Ahom tribes in this region. वो पैदा वाला दिखाई So this is the scene. I told you this the Samanandore lines when the Earth mother is imprisoned and Samanandore wants to marry her, and this is the last scene when the cobbler saint Madaya brings those sandals made of human flesh and offers them as gift to this Samanandore. And the moment he wears it, his whole body turns into a pit of flames, and then the gods, demons, and humans are released. This is the culmination of the play, and this is the text that you read yesterday. But the difference between the text and this one, because I followed a different oral text than the one who's translated, but the situation is the same. moon on the earth mother. Now he wants to subjugate and marry the earth mother. That is Samanadore. And this is Shani, who has become his flag bearer. Here comes Madaya in the sandals of burning human flesh. So he's put on the sandals.
Teni para! Womo! Teni para! Womo!
Sing my praises. वो पार्ट वन है ना उसमें आप the 40 से 45 तक एक मिनट रुकिए. So this is in Monteswami. I told you how Kodaikkal tradition moved out of this attachment to Ishtalinga. And in this scene, Monteswami enters Kalyana in a very ugly form. He has toddy in one hand and the the carcass of a dead cow on his shoulder and the leprosy, leprous and mucus flowing out of his nostrils. Very ugly and frightening. and all these priests of Kalyana, he's trying to stop him, but somehow Basavana recognizes that he's a great saint, and then he takes him to his. And Madhyaswami appears. He's born from the dung heap, and then he's taken to Basavana's house, and then he stays there for some days. Before he goes, leaves Kalyana, he wants to teach a lesson to these Jangamas. So what he performs a miracle. I told you these saints use the language. I mean, this miracle is a language, and the miracle he performs is that the Shivalingams of all these Jangamas disappear, and they say that this is the bloody magician. He has done all this to us. You give back all lingas. He says, no, no, you're supposed to somewhere. Look, if they start looking, it's not from anywhere. And then he says, oh, what, all your Shivalingas are in my toddy, picture of toddy. You come, toddy pot. Come and look for it. They don't know what to do because how to touch this toddy pot. At last they decide to look into it, but they don't pay the Shivalinga. Then Madhya Swami said, I have taken away the Shivalinga, which is man-made Shivalinga. I have given you the Shivalinga no man can make. So this is my blessing to you, and he disappears. So this debate centering around the Shivalinga, which is very important Kodaikkal tradition, and also in the stories of several other saints of this period from backward communities and untouchable communities, is dramatized in this scene. So because
ಏನ್ರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಏನ್ರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಮುಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗಿಲ್ವಲ್ರಿ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದೆ ಲಿಂಗ
now they've asked them to look for it. It was toddy pot.
ನಾನು ಹೇಳ ಅದರ ಮುಟ್ಟಿ ಅದರೊಳಗಿರೋ ಲಿಂಗ ತೆಗೆದುಬಿಡೋಣ ಬುದ್ಧಿಗೆ ಆದ್ರಿ ಆ ಸುರೇಖರಿಗೆ ಲಿಂಗ ಅದೇ ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಸುರೇಖರಿಗೆ ಲಿಂಗ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅಂಗೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೇಗೆ ಪೂಜೆ ಮಾಡು ಮತ್ತೇನ್ರಿ ಮಾಡೋದು ಇಲ್ಲ ಭಯ ಆ ಸುರೇಖರಿಗೆ ಮುಟ್ಟೋದು ಬೇಡ ಅದರೊಳಗಿರೋ ಲಿಂಗ ಕಟ್ಟೋದು ಬೇಡ ಒಂದು ಅದರ ಲಿಂಗ ಅದಿಯೋ ಇಲ್ಲ ನೋಡೋಣ ಅತ್ತ ಇತ್ತ ನೋಡುತ್ತಾರೆ ಅತ್ತ ಇತ್ತ ನೋಡುತ್ತಾರೆ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ತಿರುಗುತ್ತಾರೆ ಯೋಚನೆಯ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಾರೆ ಕೈಗೆ ಕೈಯ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಹುಳಿ ಮುಟ್ಟದ ಲಿಂಗ
Where can we believe in invisible God? Which God is not to touch.
ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಉಳಿದವರಿಗಿಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಿದ್ದಿದೆ ಅಪ್ಪ
ठीक है अगले वाला इसमें जाए पार्ट 2 में उसमें 49 से शुरू करिए. So this is the last episode of Madhya Swami, where the 5 Panchara kings of Algur have set up a huge foundry. They are mining iron and exporting iron ores to Europe, and they're now about to send an iron horse filled with explosives as a gift to the Euro King of Europe. And at that time, Swami sends the disciple Siddhapaji there because Swami wants to seize that Kali Yuga is near at hand, and there are going to be lots of upheavals during Kali Yuga. He wants to enter the Patala well, and wants the disciples to dig up this well, but there are no iron implements. So he sends the Siddhapaji to beg for iron implements from these Panchara kings. But the Panchara kings very stingy. They refuse to give him the iron implements. They say that I will give you the iron implements if you perform a miracle. What's the miracle? They say you ride on this horse and go three times around the beautiful town of Halagur. And Siddhapaji does this. Is Swami's first disciple, Siddhapaji. And then he not only goes around the town, but he also goes around all the three was comes like now give us the give me the ID. They said no, you have so many magical powers. You should be with us. You should be our slave. We'll give you whatever pay you want. We'll give you whichever number of women you whatever you want. You ask for it, it's yours, but we'll not let you go. And then Siddhapaji realizes what is written in Kalagnana book. Uses the word Kalagnana book. It's written in the Kalagnana that your destruction is near at hand. So he invokes all the deities of nature, earth goddesses, water goddesses, and wind goddesses, and ether goddesses who have been tortured by this foundry, and they invokes them in the form of Maris. Maris are the names of destructive goddesses in rural parts of South India and Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So all these Maris come, and these Panchara kings are overpowered, and then Siddhapaji takes iron implements, and then Swami enters this Patara well, and before he does, he offers his, his all his turban and his kandaya, with the staff that he holds to Siddhapaji. So this is about 5 minutes. We'll watch this. Shuru kare. Shiksha comes with all the Vedas and Puranas, but you work and prepare with active consciousness.
ಮಂಗಳಾರತಿ ಎತ್ತಿರೋ
Okay, we'll have a tea break then come back.